Hello everyone, and welcome to this lesson in the basics of Plasticity, which is a modelling software that I'm sure you're familiar with, having searched this video. My name's James. I'm a doctor with a special interest in modelling and creating prototypes, and Plasticity is a great software to learn to use, particularly if you're a non-technical professional that wants to delve into the world of modelling to express your creativity. This is by no means an exhaustive lesson, but I thought it would be useful to go through some of the basics of the interface and learn how to model a simple object. So jumping right into it, this is a object that I've created just quickly to demonstrate some of the basic functions of plasticity. When you open a new window, you'll have a cube in the center of your screen, but it won't have any of the modifications that I've made to this one here. So first of all, we're going to work in a clockwise fashion from the top left of the screen around to the right, to the side panel and to the bottom of the screen, just to get ourselves familiar. But first of all, just in terms of navigating this window here where your objects will be, the first thing to note is that similar to a lot of programs, the scroll wheel on your mouse will be able to zoom in and out, and it's going to be based around where you're putting your mouse pointer. The right click is going to pan the window view. If you middle click on the scroller wheel of your mouse, you'll be able to orbit, and again it's going to be orbiting around your initial click. And your left click on your mouse is what we're going to be using to select objects or items in our main view here. So that segues into the next section here. So in the top left, there are a couple of very important buttons. These are essentially ways that we're going to be selecting items in our main window. So as you can see here on the far left of this panel here, we have selection mode, which is control point, selection mode, which is edge, selection mode, which is face, and selection mode, which is object. The most important thing is that anytime you're selecting an item in this window, if you want to select a specific item, so you want to specifically select a point, you will not be able to do so if you're in the wrong selection mode. So if we wanted to select a point in this scene, we'd need to be changing our selection mode to point, and that's going to highlight available points for selection. Similarly, if we want to be selecting an edge, we need to select the edge selection, and then we will be able to select with a left click edges in the scene. The same goes for face select, and the same goes for object select. And that's really important to remember, because a lot of the initial teething issues people have with plasticity is they are unable to select specific objects, and it's usually because this selection panel is incorrectly pre-selected. The useful shortcuts for this panel are 1, 2, 3, and 4 on your keypad, and that will cycle through the selection modes. So 1 for point, 2 for edge, 3 for face, 4 for object. If you hit 5, it'll select all, and plasticity will be doing its best to figure out what you want to select, but I rarely use this. I usually keep it on a specific selection mode. Coming up to the top right panel now, we have different buttons that are to do with our display. This one here toggles what sort of perspective or orthographic display you want to have. I usually leave it on perspective. I find it easier, but some people will find orthographic view better. This will be a button that toggles essentially all of your overlays and whether or not you want any reference points in your scene. I almost always leave that on. X-ray mode, this is a useful thing to keep on all the time, but if we turn it off, you can see you won't be able to see faces that are hidden by the object. I always leave this on. And this final one here is render mode. I rarely use this, but this is a mode that can be toggled on and off to display actual rendering with a light source. By right-clicking on that, you can select different render options, but we won't go into too much detail on that right now. Just below that on the right-hand side is a very important cube. This is basically looking at how the viewport sees your object. And by clicking any of these faces, it'll align the object in a view that is perpendicular to the relevant axis, so X, Y, and Z. And by clicking on these different ones here, X, Y, or Z, and then panning to center your object, you can get clear reference views of your object. And then to escape that, simply orbit out of it. Now, moving to the right-hand side, this is a long panel, and this is basically where you'll be doing most of your object creation. I won't go through every panel item in this video, but what I will do is go through some of the most important ones, I find, and also how to change selection modes on them. So the most important tools that you'll be using a lot of will be the line tool, the curve tool, the circle tool. You may use the polygon tool. You may use the spiral tool. You'll most certainly use the corner rectangle or the rectangle tool. And you'll be using trim and maybe some of your 3D objects, which is sphere and corner box here, maybe cylinder as well. The main thing to note is that these are modifiable. What I mean by that is if we click on any of these objects and hold, we see that there are multiple ways that we can change how this object is drawn. And I'll be going into detail on these in another video. But this basically allows you to either make a circle from the center point click, from a 2 points, 3 points, and so on. Now, while we're talking about that, it might be useful to go through some of the basic features that we can use to interact with our object here. So let's select an edge. We're going to select this edge here. To get out of any selection that you've made in Plasticity, you hit the escape key. And you can hit it multiple times and it will deselect something that you've selected. If you're going to draw or make any object in the view portal, by left clicking, the tool will continue to be used, it will continue to draw until you hit the right click, which completes the command. In order to delete an object in its entirety, you can select it with the left mouse click and hit backspace. To undo any operation, you can use Command Z or Control Z on Windows. In order to delete a specific part, but not the whole object created, we can use what's called the trim tool, which is this scissor function here. The other way to select that is by selecting the T on your keyboard. And that will allow us to actually delete specific line segments, but not the entire line or object. A useful function is that if you do select the trim function and want to essentially get rid of multiple lines, you can hold left mouse click down and drag a box over it to highlight all of them, and they will all disappear. Again, to complete the command, the trim tab is still open. It's still active. To complete it, we can right click, or similarly to complete it, we can escape. So those are two ways to get out of any active command. The final thing I'd note is when we do select any object in the viewport, say a face, Plasticity will then decide relevant tools or modifiers to display on the bottom right of your screen. And these we can go into in further detail in later episodes. But the main thing is that these are not an exhaustive list. The exhaustive list is this tab here called See All Commands. And in this list, there are all of the ways we can modify an object selected. However, these will not all be relevant to the object selected. Most of the relevant ones will be shown in this tab here. Again, escape gets you out of any command. If you want to get access to this menu but don't want to click on it specifically, you can select F, and F will search through all of these. For instance, if you wanted to search here for a mirror function or freestyle mirror, I could search that in, and then that would allow me to select that. So that takes us through the basics of the interface. Thank you for watching this, and I'll update with a further episode on some basic asset creation.